All right, today we are going to be talking about creating a procedure from the experimental design diagram that we've been working through. So, first of all, let's just refresh. The required slides for any lab report are going to be a title slide, an abstract slide, an introduction, purpose, hypothesis slides, procedure slides. When it says slides, that means you could need more than one, depending on what you need and how big you need it to be. Data slides, analysis slides, and conclusion slides. And of course, there's a reference page slides as well. Required format, you can see what it says over there. You're going to get a baptism by fire and third person narrative, and not talking about people when we're writing the procedure in just a few moments. Make sure that it's 12-point font or greater. Actually, in slides, it's probably better 14 or greater, but 12-point will be just fine. So, procedure slides. First of all, it must be in paragraph form. Now, we're going to start off step by step, and then I'm going to show you how to transform it into a paragraph. You may need more than one paragraph. I encourage you to have more than one paragraph. It must tell exactly what you've done, to test the IV choices, measure the DV for each of the choices, and do trials, and keeping all of the CVs constant as you're doing that. Again, you may need more than one slide to complete this in your informal report. So let's go ahead and get started. So first of all, the amount of salicylic acid, acetylsalicylic acid in various aspirin brands. So in the introduction video, I wrote an introduction about this topic. And so I decided to use the same topic to create the procedure. Now, I do have to add some information for you to make sure that you understand what we're doing and what we've got going on, but it's actually pretty good because later on, if you want to use this piece of equipment, you're going to have at least some knowledge of what it is. So you can see here, we're going to use a technique called titration. Titration takes a known concentration of sodium hydroxide in this case to determine how much of the acid is there by using an acid-base reaction. So we're going to use 0.2 molar sodium hydroxide. We're going to use a burette. We're also going to use, according to this, Anacin, Bayer, BC powder, Excedrin, Meyer brand aspirin, and we're also going to use 325 milligrams of acetylsalicylic acid from the lab that's not in tablet form. And we're going to place each tablet into a 125 milliliter Erlenmeyer flask. That's the conical flask. You'll see one in just a little bit, with 25 mils of warm water and 15 mils of ethanol, swirling to dissolve the tablet fully before we start. We're going to do this 5 times with each kind of acid or aspirin, and then once the tablet is dissolved, we're going to titrate it with sodium hydroxide and an acid-based indicator called phenolphthalein, in fact, and we're going to record the amount of sodium hydroxide needed to change the indicator to a very pale pink. And this is going to be in order to calculate eventually the percent mass of the acetylsalicylic acid in the tablet of aspirin. So now we need to write a procedure for this, but we first need an ED. That's an experimental design diagram. So let's look at that. So here is the experimental design diagram for this experiment. We want to know how much acetylsalicylic acid is in the national brands of acid or aspirin. So we're going to choose the brands of aspirin. So we have our choices. Those are our IV choices. That should have been pretty clear from the setup, the scenario. Now, the DV, we are going to be measuring the volume of sodium hydroxide, and you'll notice it says 0.2 molar. Molarity describes the concentration. That's not something that you need to worry about at this moment. We'll get to that concentration issue a little later, but I need you to understand that big M means molarity. That is a concentration unit. And eventually that volume of sodium hydroxide is going to actually help us calculate the percent mass, but we're measuring the sodium hydroxide amount. We're going to use the same sized Erlenmeyer flasks. We're going to use the same concentration of sodium hydroxide, the same phenolphthalein indicator. We're going to use 1 tablet of each aspirin, and we're going to make sure that we're massing it on the same balance. We're going to use the same burette for everything so it's delivering the right way. The CG in this case will be just the acetylsalicylic acid that I measure out. That should be the same mass of acetylsalicylic acid it should be in the other tablets. So then I say for my hypothesis, I believe that the Bayer brand of aspirin will use the greatest volume of sodium hydroxide because it has the greatest amount of acetylsalicylic acid. That's hard to say. Okay, now notice it's not an if-then, and that's okay. It doesn't have to be an if-then, and eventually you will get away from the if-then. However, you will notice that I still have my choice of IV, and I have the expectation of what the DB is going to do for me. And then, of course, my title is the title that I used before. So here's our ed. Now we're going to take this information and we're going to put it into a procedure. First, though, I want to introduce you to a new piece of equipment called a burette. So this is a burette. You can see it on the left here. I'm turning on my laser pointer because I want to show you some things about the burette. So you can see my laser pointer here. So you see the burette. It's long and tall. It's skinny. It has graduations. That means marks. In our case, it's going to go from 0 up here at the top to 50 down here at the bottom. You never want to go past the 50 mark. You can't measure past the 50 mark. And you never want to start above the 0 mark. Okay, so you can see the difference between a burette and a graduated cylinder. They both measure volumes, and they both have the same scale. This graduated cylinder and this burette seem to have the same markings. Okay, but the graduated cylinder starts with 0 at the very bottom and goes up, whereas the burette starts with 0 at the very top and goes down. So it's a little different, but it's the same concept. Same concept, just a little bit of different placement. So a burette is going to measure accurately volumes. So the way that we do this is we actually fill it up over the 0 mark up here with the funnel. We put a funnel right here. We fill it up with the thing that we're going to be putting in it, the thing that we're going to titrate with. And it has to go over the 0 mark to begin with because we also have to fill up the tip. So we put it over the 0 mark and then we open it up and we fill up the tip until the meniscus, and remember the meniscus is that rounded circle. Let me see if I can draw one for you here. So, not able to get that for you, sorry. So it's the rounded circle that any water-containing liquid makes in a cylinder form. So you're going to have the bottom of the meniscus hitting the 0. Once you get to the 0 at the bottom of the meniscus, you're going to shut this off. You have this now filled and you have it at 0, and you're going to record that as your initial volume to begin with. Okay. So let's get to writing the procedure. So we're going to start off with step 1. We're going to start with steps 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We're going to do that. But then we're going to take them away and you're going to see how we do it. So we start with step 1, and step 1 is to prepare the 50 milliliter burette by using a funnel to pour the sodium hydroxide to over the 0 mark on the burette, and then fill the tip of your burette by draining the sodium hydroxide into the waste beaker until the meniscus reaches the 0 milliliter mark on the burette. So that's our first step. We've got to prepare the burette. We're going to do all of that, make sure it's all ready. All right, if we go under the 0 mark, it's not a big deal. Don't panic. You go under the 0 mark, just read the burette and put that in as your initial volume. It's not a big deal. You can't really mess up unless you're not reading the burette correctly. Okay, now we're going to record this volume as the initial volume for the first trial. So that's step 2. Step 3. Next, take 1 tablet of Anacin brand aspirin, measure the mass of the tablet on an electronic balance, and record the mass in the data table. So we're going to have a data table eventually, but we'll get there, okay? But you'll notice I'm not listing all of the things I'm going to need. I'm not telling you to gather the materials. I am simply telling you how to use the materials as I'm using them. So I am saying how I'm going to use them as I'm using them. I am not ever going to like you to have first or 2 or 3 sentences that tell me you have to gather all of these things up. Do not do that. That will not be okay. Okay, so step 4, place it into a 125 milliliter Erlenmeyer flask with 25 milliliters of warm water and 15 milliliters ethanol, and swirl until the tablet is dissolved completely. And this is really important to make sure that everything is dissolved that you can get dissolved. Step 5, add 2 to 3 drops of the phenolphthalein acid-base indicator to the dissolved aspirin and gently swirl mixing. It should remain clear. The indicator should not turn any color until the base is added. So then we're going to use the disposable pipette to suck up some of the aspirin solution. And then on a piece of white paper, we're going to begin to add sodium hydroxide carefully until the solution begins to turn pale pink. Once that happens, step 7, we're going to add the solution from the pipette, and then carefully, drop by drop, we're going to add the sodium hydroxide until the pale pink returns and remains for at least 30 seconds. If the solution turns darker, you have gone over and will need to start again. The whole point of the pipette is to help you find the point at which you need to start going more slowly. It actually, in the whiskey business, they're called whiskey thieves. We call them the titration thief. It helps us a little bit prevent us from having to do that. And once you've done a bunch of titrations, it's going to be easy to do things. Okay. So next, step 8, we're going to record the volume of the sodium hydroxide used to reach that point into the data table as the final volume for the first trial of Anacin. So after we've done that, we've reached the end point, we record the volume, and then we're going to dispose of the solution and rinse the Erlenmeyer flask, and then repeat the steps from above 4 more times for another tablet of Anacin, recording the volume of sodium hydroxide used. So we're going to go back, we're going to measure the tablet, we're going to do all of that again. So it's just telling you to repeat what you've already done. And then finally, step 10, finally repeat the entire procedure 5 times for Bayer, 5 times for BC powder, Excedrin, Meyer brand, and 125 milligrams of acetylsalicylic acid until all volumes of NaOH are recorded in the data table. So again, it's telling you, okay, you're going to do 5 trials of the Anacin, and Anacin's mentioned specifically, and then step 10 tells you you're going to repeat everything over and over again. So we're actually finished with our step-by-step process. Now we've got to take our step-by-step process and we've got to turn it into paragraphs. So here we go, step-by-step process turned into paragraphs. So I'm going to put everything on the same thing again. So we're coming back to this. I'm going to put it all there. I'm going to make it smaller so I can see it all. And then I'm going to start taking away the numbers. So you'll notice as I move forward, I took away number 10. I took away number 9. I took away number 8. I took away number 7, number 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, until I have this large paragraph. But I don't want it to remain a paragraph. I want to spread it out a little bit. So I'm going to find places in which I'm doing something a little different. So for the first one, I'm going to put a paragraph at the very beginning. And once I do that, anytime I press enter again, will automatically create that new paragraph. So I'm going to go to the next, where it says next, take 1. So after I've filled the burette, I've done what I need to do with the burette's ready to go. Now what I do with the aspirin, it tells me what to do with the aspirin. Once I've finished and dissolved the aspirin, then I'm going to use the pipette to start my titration and making sure that I'm prepared by sucking up some of that solution. And then I have a white piece of paper. I'm going to add that until the solution is pink, and then I'm going to stop. And then I'm going to record the volume. And then I'm going to dispose of the solution, repeat it again, and then finally repeat the entire procedure 5 times for the Bayer, etc. So now I've taken this and I've transferred it into paragraphs. So I just took my steps. I got rid of the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And I just put them in paragraph form. If you're doing it right, this is easy to do because once you do it, it's just a copy paste, get rid of the numbers, and then move on from there. Okay? So it's not as hard as you might think it is, but you have to make sure that you're thinking about all of the things that have to be the same, all of the things that need to be changing and measured, and that you've recorded down all of those things that you're going to be doing. Okay, so then I make it bigger so that it fits the space. And then I'm going to put it into the report. And to put it into the report, I might add a few things like setup items. So for example, here you can see I've added the setup here of the figure of the burette. So I'm showing people what the burette looks like and what I'm going to set up here. Okay, then I go to the next one and I'm showing what the titration thief is going to be looking like. So I'm going to have my flask, I'm going to have my stuff in it, I'm going to have some liquid inside the pipette, I'm going to be titrating into here and swirling, and when this turns pink, then I'm going to put the rest of this in there. It's going to turn clear again, and then I'm going to do drop by drop until I get there. So those last 3 slides, again, are what it should look like from the perspective of your lab report. So that should be it for procedure. I'm going to have you working on writing procedures, and I'm going to get those approved for you as soon as I can. Thank you very much.